Hello, I am Mantastic and Fantastic, and today I'm going to be talking about the REM machine rates being disclosed across all regions for Puzzle & Dragons. So, as part of Apple's new policy, companies that sell monetized loot boxes or things like gacha games, like the REM machine for instance, must now disclose the rolling or summoning rates for those games. So Gung-Ho, being the good guys they are, has complied, and they did so after doing a REM machine renewal right before they released these rates. So obviously they're tidying up things on their end, but in all honesty, this REM machine renewal actually comes as a good thing overall, and the rates being revealed is also a healthy thing overall. So while the rates may look a little low when you think about it, they're actually quite promising for the future of pad and other possible gacha games moving forward. So, oops, there we go. What are gacha games? So basically, Puzzle & Dragons is a gacha style game, and that utilizes a progression-oriented loot box monetization system. So what that means is the main revenue source for pad is the REM machine, because it spits out a randomized virtual reward that you only can buy through their premium currency, and you have to gamble to get something good. There's no way to acquire it any other way. So because it's a gacha or using a loot box system, they have to disclose their rolling rates. And it can be a little frustrating playing these types of gacha games because to a certain extent, your level of progression throughout the game is somewhat gatekept by good luck or the amount you actually spend or IAP. So obviously if you spend or have IAP or you have very good luck, you tend to be able to progress a little more easily because you have better cards at your disposal. Now, while Puzzle & Dragons is definitely one of the most skill-oriented games out there in the market, it doesn't matter how well you can puzzle if you don't necessarily have reasonable cards to do so. And at least as of late, Gung-Ho has been heavily pushing 6-star Godfest exclusives, 6-star Pantheons, and ultra-rare collab rolls as the only good or the top-tier stuff at this point in time. So it can be a little frustrating. So with the rates being revealed, they're obviously going to tidy things up to make things look more appealing for the most part. And with that in mind, we should be having or should be experiencing a better rolling rates overall. And I wouldn't be surprised necessarily if like other games started following suit or like Gung-Ho branches off and does more things in conjunction with revealing the rolling rates. Because I know something like Fire Emblem Heroes has always revealed their rolling rates since I think the inception of the game. And it is nice because people know what their odds are so they can make informed decisions. So like I guess it's still gambling, but it's more informed gambling, whatever. Regardless, it's another can of worms and another article and video for the most part. So with that in mind, the REM machine renewal basically did a massive overhaul of what is currently available within it. Because when you think about it, Puzzle & Dragons is one of the most long-standing games out there in the market. And because it's so financially successful and because there's so many years under its belt, Gung-Ho has been able to basically pump out content at a very fast and frequent rate. So this fast and frequent rate is great for players because now we have all this new content to keep playing through and also new cards to work towards or chase and that sort of idea. Now, that's all fine and dandy, but when it comes to a loot box system style game, it becomes very challenging to start rolling the newer cards because the pool of monsters you can draw from becomes more and more bloated or inflated. So with this REM machine renewal, we've basically taken this like bloated REM machine pool that we initially had and greatly condensed it down. Furthermore, with the REM machine renewal, there will be a cyclic nature. These are all the cards that are possible to roll from the REM machine, but these are the amount of cards you actually can roll at any given time. So we basically went from something that's big and bloated with tons of different cards to something that has less cards, and then now something that has even less cards from the possible available ones. And this is a great deal because this is almost like a two-prong, or a double-prong sword, or a TPA if you may, because we have two distinct benefits. We have less trash to roll as well as a smaller pool of available cards. So less trash means that we've basically removed all the silver eggs. So for the most part, all the silver eggs were horrible and it makes you sad and cry inside. You sell for 3,000 monster points and you still feel sad. And by removing them, there's only a couple that are really standout options, but by removing them, we've obviously taken out the worst possible roll. So basically, imagine if the worst possible roll was down here. By taking those out, the worst possible roll is up here now. we've just basically raised the ceiling of what is the worst thing you can actually acquire. So that is, I guess, good for the most part because it does at least kind of power creep our rare machine overall. And by basically removing this trash, we're going to have a much better time rolling because in theory, everything should have higher rates overall because the pool of cards you can roll from has been narrowed down. However, I guess this is maybe a small drawback for some individuals because there are some silvers that are actually quite powerful, like the elementals that can void damage for 3 turns from their specific color, Exahydra, and maybe Chrono Turtle for memes. Like, we can't acquire these cards any other way. Like, maybe they'll do something like they did for the late bloomers and give them as a gift dungeon, but that remains to be seen because in Japan they have Pad Radar and that can be used to acquire these cards, so we don't have this option, unfortunately. Now, smaller pool of available cards. So we're going to kind of use that same like condensing image. So basically we went from here, less trash, to here. And now this is the pool of cards we can get from the rare machine moving forward. However, they will only feature a specific amount of them at any given time. So that means this pool here in the middle, that's all you're able to roll. Those other cards on the outside are still able to be obtained from the rare machine, but not at that given time because it's going to go through this cyclic nature. Now, by removing a lot of different available cards, we basically have a much smaller list to work with. So let me kind of paint a different picture. So let's imagine that there are 5-star Pantheon cards you really want to have. And let's say hypothetically they had a 30% chance of being rolled. Any 5-star Pantheon has a 30% chance of being rolled. If there are 95-star Pantheon cards available, the odds of you getting one of those is actually quite low in the grand scheme of things. However, if we were to take that group of 90 and trim it down to only 30, we'd have only 30 available 5-star Pantheon cards, but the overall rolling rate has not been changed. There's still a 30% chance to roll the 5-star Pantheon card, except you only have a pool of 30 instead of 90 to draw from. So that means each of those Pantheon cards basically has a 3 times higher chance of being rolled if this example holds true moving forward. But basically with that kind of illustration, this is giving us a much more specific pool to draw from. So imagine if we wanted, say, 7 specific Pantheon cards, and most of them were featured at this point in time. It's going to be much easier to roll them because they individually have a much higher rolling rate than they did before the rare machine renewal. So this is great for especially trying to acquire newer Pantheon cards that you are missing. So when they are featured, you are much more likely to roll those cards, because if we're going to take a look at the rolling rates down below, I can almost guarantee you that those 5-star Pantheon cards that are listed here would have been like significantly lower beforehand. So basically having less trash overall means the worst roll is elevated, and having a more specific pool to draw from means you're able to snipe the card you actually want. So this was taken on today, which is January 19, 2018, and these are the current rare machine rolling rates in North America. And this can be found under your egg machine button, and then click the lineup in the top corner. And this will go through a cyclic pattern, and I'm going to be basically showcasing like the major points here. So we have the highlights and 6-star base cards. So the highlighted cards basically are those that have significantly improved rolling rates. And in this case here, the 6-star cards of, I can't remember the name of this Pantheon, but this Pantheon here has actually the highest rolling rates of any other card in the entire machine. So that's a big deal, because for the most part, these 6-star cards are the big chase ones you actually want to acquire. Furthermore, there will be other highlights of former 5-star Godfest exclusives. We need to think of a name for them. I'm not sure what to use, but those ones are also highlighted. So for the most part, it looks like being highlighted gives you at least a 2 times rate, because these other 6-star cards here have a 0.66% and 1.4 if they're highlighted, it seems. So that's important. And then former 5-star Godfest exclusives, we're 0.5% if you are not highlighted. So that is a big problem, because now 5-star Godfest exclusives suddenly became incredibly rare to roll. But if we go down here into the other 5-star cards, we can basically see that any 5-star card except for former 5-star Godfest exclusives has this 1.23% rolling rate. And that is incredibly amazing for the Wise Dragons and Gemstone Princesses, because the Wise Dragons and Gemstone Princesses are actually the best burst style inherits you can really have in the game. And for the most part, because either they're very new like the Wise Dragons, or they had truly bizarre rotational methods for distribution for the Gemstone Princesses, most players don't actually have them. So by actually having all 10 of them available, and it looks like all 10 possibly be available moving forward all the time, it's going to be significantly easier to nail one of these, because if you think about it, there are 10 of them. So you basically have like a 12.3% chance, give or take, of actually acquiring one of these valuable cards. That is pretty good. Like, I can pretty much guarantee you beforehand there was not a 10% chance of getting one of these cards before. So this is quite amazing. This is definitely a good time to be alive playing Pad, because now we can get these glorious burst inherits with relative ease. But on the flip side, former 5-star Godfest exclusives have the lowest chance of being rolled. There are only 0.5% chance. That is pretty low for the most part. Like, it's a little shocking. So looking at the rare machine overall and looking at the biggest winners and losers, the biggest winners are easily hands down the Wise Dragons and Gemstone Princesses. They are so much more readily available compared to beforehand, and by gaining your first one will definitely propel you forward, because now you have great burst damage potential for when we face things with like hundreds and hundreds of millions of health. The biggest losers, unfortunately, are the former 5-star Godfest exclusives, such as Green Odin, because they have only a 0.5% chance of being rolled. Now, that is problematic, but it can also be a blessing for long-term players, because if you've been playing for an exceptionally long time, you've probably rolled more than enough 5-star Godfest exclusives for like you ever could imagine, because they were featured every single Godfest and they had pretty high rolling rates. So you might be like me and have like 5 or 6 Green Odins. You might have like 8 Light Metatrons. This is not necessarily uncommon considering how old they are and how they were always featured. So because of that, by actually having them reduced down, even highlight is only 1%, it can be a good thing. But I guess newer players who need things like, say, Saria, Green Odin are going to have a little bit of a tougher time, Tsubaki kind of as well. But for the most part, still, I guess, a positive thing. But they definitely came out at the very bottom for the rare machine. Now, I talked about all these rates here, but this does not include the 6-star Godfest exclusives when they are added during Godfest events. So it's going to be my presumption that everything will have a soft decrease in their rolling rates to basically make space or room for the 6-star Godfest exclusives that will be featured. Again, I don't know what's going to happen exactly, but that's my speculation. Maybe all the good cards will go down and the bad fillers will stay higher. I don't know, but next Godfest we get to take a look, which is quite exciting overall. So, in conclusion, this rare machine renewal and changing format is actually quite beneficial for the most part, provided the 6-star Godfest exclusive cards are not like insanely horrible for the most part. Like if they end up being like say 0.25, obviously we'd be disappointed. But I feel like they're not going to be that low because they kind of have some accountability. They can't advertise terrible rolling rates for their best cards. So I think this is going to kind of keep like gaming companies more honest overall and give players at least a better shot at acquiring something more rare and valuable. Now, with all that being said, do you think it's a good idea to have rolling rates disclosed? I know for a fact that it's going to be, these are much better rolling rates overall than they would have been pre-Rare Machine Renewal, and especially before when you played, say, 5 years ago, when you could get Golems and Mystic Knights out of the Rare Machine. So let me know what you think about this whole rolling rates being disclosed in the comments below, as well as how do you think you are going to approach the Rare Machine moving forward in terms of like utilizing stones or even IAPing. Hopefully you all have a fantastic day. I wish you all the best of luck in your own pad adventures, and happy puzzling.